Hi kids, it's Grumpy. Let's read a book.
Hi kids, it's Grumpy. Let's read a book. I've got a pretty good book here. Look at how thick it is. I don't know how long this is going to take, but we'll see how we get through it. Anyway, this book is called LarryBoy and the Awful Earwax Attacks. And it's a VeggieTales book by Bob Katula. There's LarryBoy right there, and look at his eyes all swirly. Let's see. This is the book 2, LarryBoy and the Awful Earwax Attacks. Earwax have attacked Bumblyburg. LarryBoy's fiendish nemesis, Alvin the Onion, is behind it and has unleashed the awful earwax to interfere with being a good listener. When Larry falls into Alvin's awful trap and he can no longer listen, it's up to Junior Asparagus and LarryBoy's faithful butler and mentor Archie to foil the evil plot. What will come of Bumblyburg now that their superhero is under Alvin's awful spell? Will Junior and Archie be able to convince LarryBoy to listen to them in time to save Bumblyburg? Will LarryBoy's super suction ears be saturated with evil for all time? Alvin's out to rule the city and LarryBoy forever. That sounds scary. Well, let's just get into this. LarryBoy and the Awful Earwax Attacks. That's kind of fun to say. All right. Larry and the Awful Earwax Attacks. There's the story. And there's Lampy and Junior Asparagus. Written by Bob Katula, illustrated by Michael Moore. Okay. Oh, table of contents. There's a lot of chapters here. A lot of pages. So anyway, at least it's got some pictures to look at. There's LarryBoy. This is Chapter 1, The Giant Slime Monster. It was an average day in Bumblyburg. The leaves were rustling on the trees. The birds were perched on the statues in the park. And Bumblyburg's own superhero, LarryBoy, was on patrol. LarryBoy was slowly driving the LarryMobile around the city, looking for signs of crime or other superhero-needing situations. Normally, LarryBoy liked going on patrol, but today he was bored. "I'm so bored," he said. "There's nothing happening today, except for the situation with the birds and the statues, but I'm not going to intervene in that. If I don't see some sort of trouble soon, I'm going to go home and make myself a big peanut butter sandwich." The LarryMobile screeched to a halt. LarryBoy saw something coming over the hill, and he couldn't believe his eyes. What is that? The great big slimy purple blob was creeping over the hill, wiggling menacingly as it came. "Oh, peanut brittle," said LarryBoy. "It's a giant purple slime monster." Right then, LarryBoy would have attacked the giant purple slime monster in an effort to save Bumblyburg from its vicious slimy attacks. He would have attacked, except for one thing. LarryBoy was scared of giant purple slime monsters. So, instead, LarryBoy parked the LarryMobile and jumped into the bushes to hide as the giant purple slime monster came over the hill. "Bumblyburg is doomed," LarryBoy thought to himself. "We need a superhero or something to stop it." Then, with horror, LarryBoy realized something. "Wait. I am that hero!" Drat! Even though he was afraid, he had to try to stop the giant purple slime monster. Bumblyburg depended on him. So as the giant purple slime monster passed the bushes where LarryBoy was hiding, he closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and fired one of his plunger ears. "Hey," said the giant purple slime monster. "I've been plungerized." This startled LarryBoy. He didn't expect the giant purple slime monster to talk. Besides, it didn't sound anything like a giant purple slime monster should sound. "Help, get this plunger off of me, I can't see," it said. Then LarryBoy realized something. The giant purple slime monster didn't sound like a giant purple slime monster. It sounded like Wally. LarryBoy looked up from behind the bushes, and this is what he saw. Herbert and Wally, carrying the largest plate of grape-flavored gelatin he had ever seen. LarryBoy rushed from the bushes and released Wally from his plunger ear. Herbert and Wally explained that they had filled the giant swimming pool with grape gelatin, and now they were taking the whole thing home to eat. They didn't even seem to mind that there was a pair of swim fins and a life preserver suspended in the middle of the giant gelatin mold. "Wow," said LarryBoy. "That's a lot of gelatin." A whole swimming pool full. I guess that would be a lot of gelatin. There's a picture to look at. Chapter 2. Mushroom Amok. This would have probably been the yummiest day of Herbert and Wally's life, except for what happened next. As LarryBoy stood admiring the huge purple blob of gelatin, young Angus Mushroom zoomed up on a scooter, going way too fast. "Coming through," shouted Angus. LarryBoy jumped out of the way just in time. But when he jumped aside, he bumped into Wally, causing the giant gelatin to wobble and jiggle dangerously. "Whoa," said Herbert and Wally as they tried not to drop the wiggly purple glob. "Hold on," said LarryBoy. "If I could just activate my gelatin stabilizer device." But it was too late. Herbert and Wally lost control of the gelatin and dropped it right on LarryBoy. Wow. LarryBoy was a sticky purple mess. Look at that picture. On top of that, he was stuck in a life preserver. "Are you okay?" asked Herbert. "Of course I'm okay," said LarryBoy. "It takes more than getting mucked up with gelatin to stop a superhero, but Angus Mushroom might cause more accidents if I don't stop him." LarryBoy got up and hopped over to the Larrymobile, where he pulled out a rocket-powered skateboard and a helmet. "Traffic violation. This is a job for LarryBoy," he said. With that, LarryBoy, covered in purple gelatin, with the life preserver around his waist, hopped onto the skateboard and took off after Angus. Problem was, LarryBoy wasn't so good at skateboarding. "Woo, doggy," he said as he whooshed after Angus. In seconds, the rocket-powered LarryBoy caught up to Angus, and LarryBoy rode beside him. "Stop, stop," said LarryBoy. "Scott?" said Angus with a confused expression. "My name's Angus, not Scott." "I know," said LarryBoy, "but you have to—" Wham! LarryBoy was so busy trying to get Angus to stop that he didn't notice Pa Grape walking along the sidewalk carrying a barrel of Mexican jumping beans. LarryBoy crashed into the barrel, sending the jumping beans everywhere, including down his spandex superhero suit. "Hey," said Pa Grape, "you spilled my jumping beans." "Sorry," said LarryBoy, "but I gotta stop Angus before he causes more accidents." So LarryBoy got back on his Larryboard and zoomed off after Angus, covered in gelatin, a life preserver around his tummy, and Mexican jumping beans in his suit. Crazy. LarryBoy caught up to Angus and his scooter again. "Halt," he said. "Malt?" said Angus. "I'd love a chocolate malt." "No, no," said LarryBoy. Wham! Again, LarryBoy wasn't looking where he was going, so he didn't see the big hat display out in front of the ladies' clothing store. He crashed right into it, sending hats everywhere, including a big flowery one that landed on his head. But LarryBoy knew he had to stop Angus before he caused any more accidents. So he kept on going, covered in grape gelatin, a life preserver around his waist, Mexican jumping beans in his suit, and a lady's hat on his head that covered his eyes. "Oh, what's that? That says stop." Then he ran smack into a wall. "Ouch," he said. Fortunately for LarryBoy, Chief Crosswell had volunteered to fill in for the school crossing guard that day. He was just about to help Junior Asparagus across the street when he saw Angus coming on a scooter, going way too fast. Chief Crosswell held up his stop sign and yelled, "Stop!" Angus read the stop sign and finally came to a stop. "Why does everyone keep calling me Scott?" he asked. Moments later, LarryBoy rocked up on the Larryboard and ran into a mailbox. "Ouch," he said. By now, the jumping beans in his suit were really starting to tickle. He leapt off his Larry board and began jumping around as if his suit was on fire. Chief Crosswell and Junior Asparagus looked at LarryBoy, who was jumping around wildly, covered in purple gelatin, wearing a life preserver around his waist and a lady's hat on his head. "Are you okay, LarryBoy?" Junior asked. "Yeah," said LarryBoy. "Why do you ask?" Chapter 3. Taffy but no Laffy. As Chief Crosswell tried to sort things out, a dark figure watched from a nearby alley. Doing his best to cloak himself in darkness, this dark figure was LarryBoy's arch enemy, Awful Alvin the Onion, a tall, thin stalk of a villain with a bulbous head. He peered through a monocle under one of his bushy eyebrows, but noticed the light on behind him. Awful Alvin turned on his henchman, Lampy, who was, well, a floor lamp. "Turn off your light, Lampy," said Awful Alvin. "You'll give away our location." Lampy didn't respond, so Awful Alvin reached over and switched Lampy's light off himself. "We can't let LarryBoy and Chief Crosswell see us now. After all, the test on Angus Mushroom worked perfectly. Soon I shall be able to unleash my awful plan. Then LarryBoy and all of Bumblyburg will be listening to me and only me. Ha 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 ha." Okay, there's LarryBoy. For some reason, Lampy didn't laugh along. Half an hour later, Angus's mother, Gladys Mushroom, arrived to take her son home. Angus was waiting with Chief Crosswell and LarryBoy, who kept jumping around and bumping into walls with the lady's hat still on his head. "Are you okay, LarryBoy?" asked Gladys. "Of course," said LarryBoy. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" Chief Crosswell turned to Gladys. "We're glad you're here," he said. "We've been questioning Angus for half an hour, but he won't tell us why he was riding his scooter so recklessly. He just won't listen to us." Gladys looked at her son with a frown that let Angus know he was in big trouble. "Why do you look so mad?" asked Angus. "I was only doing what you told me to do." "What are you talking about?" she said. "You said take your scooter and play in traffic," said Angus. "I said no such thing," said Gladys. "I said get some sugar for making taffy." She turned to Chief Crosswell and said, "I love to make taffy. My specialty is chicken-flavored taffy." LarryBoy, who was still covered in a purple gelatin, wearing a life preserver around his tummy and a lady's hat on his head, and still had pants full of jumping beans, tripped and fell into a puddle. "Oh, look at that. Those are mug shots. That is Alvin, Awful Alvin, and Lampy." This is Chapter 4. Give me a home where the cockroaches roam. Before we go any farther with our story, we should probably go back and talk about Awful Alvin. You need to know how truly awful he is. Awful Alvin, like any other villain worth his weight in doomsday dungarees, had a secret underground lair. Awful Alvin's particular secret underground lair was a humble starter lair on the outskirts of Bumblyburg. It was a pretty bad neighborhood, but not quite as Awful Alvin would have liked. Something to work up to, he thought. The roaches and vermin made it feel like home, though. So Awful Alvin had put out his unwelcome mat and settled in. Second-hand computers and lame lab equipment surrounded him, the kind of stuff you grew tired of when you were 6. Still, there's a bunch of stuff. That must be his lair. Still, by keeping the lights low, never cleaning, Awful Alvin was able to create a creepy enough setting for villainy and outdated computer games. Lights flashed. Liquids bubbled. Turbines whirred. Generators chugged, and an array of devices blipped and chirped, all language of all their own. Not to mention, something behind the refrigerator really stunk. By Awful Alvin's side stood his faithful partner in crime, Lampy. During his years of villainy, Awful Alvin had been so awful that he had driven away all his friends, like the time in the tropics when he replaced apple strudel's sunscreen with olive oil and burned his light and flaky crust, or the time that he scared the Pumpkin Brothers half to death by filling their beds with fake seeds and orange silly string while they slept. After a while, Lampy was the only one who seemed to be able to put up with him. "Lampy," said Awful Alvin as they returned to their lair, "the test was a success. The earwax worked perfectly." Awful Alvin held up a small velvet box and opened the lid. He reached in and took out a tiny blinking gadget, no larger than a ladybug. But it wasn't a ladybug. It was an earwax. Taking a ladybug out of the box at this point would make absolutely no sense whatsoever. "Who would ever think such a small, unnoticeable thing as my earwax could interfere with something so important as listening?" Alvin pondered. The first part of his evil plan had worked to perfection. When he had slipped the first pair of experimental earwax into Angus Mushroom's bedroom the night before, he placed the box beside Angus's bed and left a note reading, "Hey kid, tired of always having to listen to adults telling you what to do? Then try these new earwax. You'll be able to fool your parents and teachers into thinking that you're listening when actually you'll only hear what you want to hear." This sounded just great to Angus. But he eagerly put the earwax into his ears. Instantly, he began hearing only what he wanted to hear. When his mom scolded, "Angus, you're late for breakfast," Angus heard, "Angus, you're great for being so fast." As he headed out the door for school, his mom called, "Honey, be sure to get some sugar for making taffy." And as you already know, what Angus heard was, "Honey, be sure to take your scooter and play in traffic." The earwax had worked perfectly. Not only had Angus heard what he wanted to hear and nothing more, but the earwax also caused him to ride his scooter recklessly, which caused LarryBoy to end up with Lady's hat on his head. Wow. Things couldn't have gone any better if Awful Alvin had planned it that way. Of course, he had planned it that way. So, in his final analysis, Awful Alvin had to conclude that things could not have gone any better. But this was only the beginning. Angus was a small potato, or more accurately, a small mushroom. Awful Alvin was after the big prize now. He was after LarryBoy. And when he caught the superhero, Awful Alvin had something especially awful planned. "Behold, the extreme earwax, Lampy." From a very large box, Awful Alvin carefully lifted two glowing objects. The softball-sized orbs pulsed orange like hot metal and caused a slight tremor in the air. When these are placed in the super suction ears of that purple pretender, LarryBoy will have to listen to me, and only me, for the rest of his days. Awful Alvin put the extreme earwax back in their box and began laughing. "Ha ha 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 ha! My plan is so brilliant that if I hadn't come up with it myself, I wouldn't have believed that someone could come up with a plan so brilliant. But I, Awful Alvin, am brilliant, awfully brilliant. So I do believe it. I do. Ha 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 ha." Okay, is that Bob the Tomato? Yep, he's the editor. Okay. Chapter 5. Coffee, anyone? Later that day, Bob the Tomato sat at his desk sipping coffee from his world's sauciest editor mug and thinking of all the reasons that it was really fun to be the editor of the Daily Bumble newspaper. Reason number 36. I can have all the hot coffee I want. Reason number 37. If I had feet, I could put them up on my desk, and no one would tell me that I couldn't. Reason number 38. I can sit around thinking of useless lists and it looks like I'm working. Just then, Junior Asparagus burst into his office. "Editor Bob," said Junior. "What?" said Bob as he woke from his daydreaming. He was so startled by Junior that he knocked over his cup of steaming hot coffee on his desk. "Oh no, can somebody get Larry the janitor in here?" he yelled. Then he looked back at Junior. Junior Asparagus, haven't I told you never to burst into my office while I'm working? Well, yeah, said Junior, but I've got a really great lead on a story. You see, Angus Mushroom wasn't listening to his mother, and Bob jumped in without listening. Wait a minute. Since when is it news when a kid doesn't listen to his mother? It happens every day. Why, it happens every minute. Right now, somewhere in Bumblyburg, some kid's not listening. Bob continued without letting Junior get a word in edgewise. I've tried to explain this before, Junior. When a dog bites a person, that's not news. If it happens every day, when a person bites a dog, now that's news. It hardly ever happens, except when my grandpa Ed and his dog, Rusty, but that's the exception. I'm not going to cover a story about kids not listening. I can't. I hope you understand. Junior sulked out of Bob's office. He knew there was more to this story. He decided that he couldn't give up. He hadn't given up when he was writing stories for the Bumblyburg Elementary Reader. His determination allowed him to break the big story on suspiciously shorter recesses, and he had to work hard to get some of his other stories published, such as Turbocharge Your Gerbil Wheel, the much-talked-about article that explained how to popularize motorsports with domestic rodents. Junior decided that this not listening story had to be covered. He decided right then and there that he would go interview Angus Mushroom right after school. Back in his office, Bob the Tomato was getting redder by the minute. He was extremely annoyed that Larry wasn't in his office yet. He was about to place an ad for a new janitor when he heard the voice of Gladys Mushroom. "Yoo-hoo," she said. "Mrs. Mushroom?" said Bob. "What are you doing here?" "Well, I just made a batch of my famous chicken-flavored taffy, and I was wondering if you wanted some." "Well, said Bob as Larry rushed into the room. "I got here as soon as I could, Bob." "Finally," Bob groaned. "What is it, Bob? One of the printing presses needs its thingamabob adjusted? A massive roll of newsprint is off its doohickey? The folding mechanism all cattywampus?" Larry couldn't wait to actually fix something. "No, it's coffee," Bob said, pointing to the site of the spill. "That mop should do the trick. Now while you clean up, I'm going to go have some taffy." Janitor Larry doesn't sound like he's too thrilled to be mopping up coffee. Chapter 6. Speak softly and carry a big mop. Larry was cleaning up the last of the coffee spill when his mop handle began to vibrate. "I think my mop has had a little too much caffeine," he thought. Then he remembered that his trusted friend and butler, Archie, had installed a digital communications device into the mop handle so he can contact LarryBoy when necessary. "Hello, Master Larry," Archie said. "Can you hear me?" "Yes, Archie," Larry answered, speaking into the mop handle, but he couldn't find the handy video screen. "You're coming in loud and clear. This thing is so cool. It's the best thing to hit the janitorial world since blue toilet water." "Hello? Master Larry, are you there?" Larry could hear Archie, but it was apparent that Archie could not hear Larry. "Are you talking directly into the mop?" Archie said. "You need to speak directly into it." Now Larry remembered he was supposed to turn the mop upside down and talk directly into it. But the bottom of his mop was in the bucket, and the bucket had coffee in it. Larry looked around Bob's office and found a world's sauciest editor mug and poured the coffee into it. Then he flipped the bucket and mop over his head and stuck his head into it. "Archie, can you hear me now?" Larry shouted. Larry's voice boomed into the headphones that Archie was wearing, causing him to grit his teeth into a distorted grin. "Master Larry," Archie said with a sigh, "take the bucket off your head. It creates quite an echo." Larry lifted the bucket off his head, which allowed the screen to come into focus. "There you are." "Master Larry, I just wanted to remind you about your superhero class tonight at the Bumblyburg Community College. I'll see you right after class." "Really? Will you be in the hall when I come out of class?" Larry asked. "No, I'll be here at home," Archie replied. So technically, you won't see me right after class, Larry said with a frown. Technically, no, Archie agreed, because even in good traffic with the LarryMobile, I may not get there until... I understand, Archie interrupted. I'll see you moments after you arrive home. Really? Will you be waiting for me at the door? Larry asked. Perhaps you should get back to your janitorial duties, Master Larry, Archie said, before you arouse suspicion. Oh, right, Archie. Toodles, Larry said, switching off the mop before he went back to cleaning Bob's office. This is Junior Asparagus. Chapter 7. The Earwax Unravels. Junior Asparagus was a determined reporter. He always got his story, but this story was really testing the limits of his patience. He had been sitting in Angus Mushroom's bedroom for half an hour, and he wasn't getting anywhere. Angus just plain wasn't listening to any of his questions. Junior tried again. What's causing your listening problem? He asked for the 10th time. I told you, Angus. Oh, I told you, said Angus. I'm not pausing to do a whistling album. Junior beat his head against the reporter's notebook. No, that's not what I said at all. I've asked the same question every time. Look, I've even got it written down right here. Junior held the notebook up to Angus and showed him the question. This time, Angus seemed to understand. I don't have a listening problem, but I do have something really cool. It's my new earwax. Ew, gross, Junior said, scrunching up his nose. But then Junior realized something. Angus was having trouble listening, but he could read just fine. Mom was really mad when I got home, said Angus. She made me wash my ears out real good. I even had to take my earwax out, but I put them back in when I was done. Junior winced at the thought of earwax being yanked out of and put back into someone's ears. He wrote another question on the paper and showed it to Angus. Why would you want to do that? So I can hear whatever I want to, Angus said. It was easy. I just reached in and pulled the earwax right out, then I stuck them right back in again. Junior, not normally squeamish, was getting a little greener around the stalk. But he knew a good reporter didn't let his feelings get in the way, so he wrote another question. It came out in one big chunk? No, it's little, said Angus. Want to see it? Junior nodded nervously, not really wanting to look, but when Angus showed him the small blinking earwax devices, the reporter's instincts took over. What are those? Earwax, Angus said again. Like I've been telling you all along. He showed Junior the box they came in, and Junior read the note that came with them. Hey kid, tired of always having to listen to adults tell you what to do? Then try these new earwax. You'll be able to fool your parents and teachers into thinking that you're listening when actually you're only hearing what you want to hear. Now Junior understood. Those gizmos were called earwax. It wasn't ordinary earwax that was causing the listening problem. It was earwax. Where did they come from? Junior asked, and then listened as Angus explained that they were right on the table next to the open window when he woke up that morning. Someone had planted them there while he slept. So you don't hear anything with them in? Only when you don't want to, Angus said, putting them back in. You only hear what you want to hear. Junior stopped to think about what this meant. He thought about all the times the kids didn't want to listen to something important. Directions, rules, guidance, all sorts of information that came from teachers, parents, doctors, even God. Where would it end? It would be very tempting to just stop listening to what you didn't want to hear, but the consequences could be disastrous. Junior knew that earwax were a serious threat to Bumblyburg, and he had to stop them from getting into anyone else's ears. Junior turned the box over to see if there was anything else written on it. On the bottom, he noticed the initials M.M. M.M., Junior shouted. Just then Gladys Mushroom popped her head in the door. Anyone want some taffy? You bet, said Angus. His ears worked just fine when he came to hearing about taffy, but Junior Asparagus knew he had no time for taffy. Thanks, Mrs. Mushroom, but I've got to get this down to the Daily Bumble right away so I can warn everybody about this mysterious MM before he plants any more earwax. Junior rushed out of the room, leaving Mrs. Mushroom with a confused expression. Why would anyone want to plant earwax? Okay, Chapter 8, An Irregular Story. Bob the Tomato was heading down the hall on his way back to his office at the Daily Bumble. As he walked along, he was daydreaming again. This time he was thinking about how much fun it would be to play in a pool filled with grape gelatin. You could bounce all over the place, play bouncy bowling, turn somersaults, and... Editor Bob, Junior yelled as he burst into the Daily Bumble building. What? Said Bob as he once again broke out of his daydreaming. Junior rushed up to Bob. I've got big news. Earwax are what's prevented Angus Mushroom from listening. Earwax? Bob replied. Ew, isn't that a little irregular? He chuckled at his own little joke. Well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that big story. No, you don't understand, Junior persisted. It is a big story. We have to warn people before everyone has earwax. Junior, I think most folks already have earwax, Bob said with a grin. I'm afraid that's not a good enough story for the Daily Bumble. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some important work to do. Bob went back to his office and was pleased to see Larry working. The coffee spill had been cleaned up. Wow, he thought, Larry even brought me a new cup of coffee. He walked over and took a big gulp from his world's sauciest editor mug, not knowing that he was about to drink a fresh cup of squeezed mop. Yuck. Something wrong, Bob? Asked Larry. You're looking a little green, and that is unusual for you. Bob didn't respond. He was too busy feeling ill. Larry shrugged and walked out into the hall where he ran into Junior Asparagus. What's up, Junior? He asked. I've got to think of a way to convince Bob that there's a serious threat to Bumblyburg, Junior insisted. And I'm not talking about the return of polyester. Bob doesn't seem to be talking to anyone just now, Larry said. Why don't you tell me about it? It's right here in this box, Junior said, taking out the small box labeled earwax. It's the earwax that came out of Angus's mushroom's ears. Ew, Larry said, wrinkling his nose. No, look, Junior said, opening the box. Ew, earwax, Larry said, wrinkling his entire face and hiding behind his mop. Then he peeked around the mop strands and saw two blinking dots, like electronic ladybugs. Ooh, that's pretty cool. For the next 5 minutes, Larry listened with rapt attention as Junior told him what he had learned about the earwax in the MM initials. He told Larry how important it was to warn everyone before the earwax got out to the general public. This sounds like a job for LarryBoy, Larry said, striking a heroic pose. Yeah, Junior said, smiling at the janitor's sudden goofiness. Someone should tell him. I am that someone, Larry said. Now he was thinking like LarryBoy. This had to be the work of one of his arch enemies, but he couldn't think of anyone with the initials MM other than the former NBA star Moses Malone. Larry was pretty sure it wasn't him. He knew he had to get a pair of earwax to Archie for analysis. Could I have those? Larry asked Junior, taking the earwax. I have some equipment in my janitor's closet that could give us some answers. You'd be surprised what I could do with a good plunger and some duct tape. Don't worry, Junior. I'll take it from here. Junior reluctantly agreed. Okay, but if your equipment doesn't work, be sure to get it in the hands of LarryBoy. Will do, Larry shouted as he disappeared around the corner. Is that a superhero school? Chapter 9, A Class Act. After LarryBoy got the earwax to Archie, he went on to his superhero class at the Bumblyburg Community College. The classroom was filled with a colorful assortment of costumes that concealed the true identities of the superheroes. Just as Bok Choy, the teacher of the class, made his way to the front of the classroom, LarryBoy's belt buckle began beeping. All of the superheroes looked at their belts to see if Their belt radios were beeping. Mine, Larry said as he got up to step out into the hall. Sorry for the interruption, fellas, but I'm going to have to take this. Superhero stuff, you know. Yo, LarryBoy speaking. Master Larry, it's Archie. Well, of course it's you, Archie. No one else has this number, Larry said. I've determined that the earwax have a tiny microchip that somehow interferes with the user's ability to listen, Archie said. And according to the computer, the initials MM seem to stand for Masked Messenger. Aha, then it's not Moses Malone. No, I'm afraid you'll have to look elsewhere for this Masked Messenger. He could be hard to spot. He might be wearing a mask, LarryBoy said. Correct. That means he could even be in your class posing as a superhero, Archie pointed out. Be on your toes, Master Larry. Larry looked down, a little confused about how he could do that. Wow, a villain in superhero class. Wait until I tell the other superheroes. They'll be so excited. No, Master Larry, Archie said. You can't let the masked messenger know that you're on to him. Say nothing to anyone. There was no response. Archie waited a moment until he realized that LarryBoy was taking his advice a little too literally. I mean, say nothing to anyone in class? Archie clarified. Oh, said LarryBoy. Bok Choy was already speaking as LarryBoy returned to the classroom. So if you'll turn to your superhero handbook to section 20, paragraph 1, line 5, we come to today's lesson. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. Larry stood in the doorway and scanned the classroom, looking at the masks of the superheroes were wearing. Could one of them be the masked messenger? He whispered to himself. Electro Melon, could you tell us why listening is so important? Bok Choy asked. Certainly. Even though we're all superheroes with super gadgets and superpowers, we don't know everything there is to know, he said. We can always learn from someone else, whether they're young or old. That's right, EM. Very good, Bok Choy said. Everyone can teach us something. LarryBoy continued looking around the class and found something very disturbing. There was not just one superhero with the letters MM on his mask. There were two. Oh no, Bok Choy continued. Oh no! Bok Choy continued the lesson. The second part of that message is to let the discerning get guidance. That means we also need to be careful to whom we listen to. Raisin Boy, would you care to elaborate on that? Yes, sir. That means it's important to listen to those who want what's best for us. People like our parents, our teachers, and God, to name a few. Good answer, Raisin Boy. It's also important that we can trust the people to whom we listen. Chapter 10. Looking for M&M and Going Plain Nuts. LarryBoy was worried. How would he ever be able to figure out which superhero with an MM on their mask was the real masked Marvel? He'd have to talk to them, but how could he do that with Bok Choy in the room? Bok Choy would probably catch him talking, and LarryBoy didn't want to have to go stand in the corner again. That dunce hat really clashed with his costume. Suddenly, LarryBoy had an idea. He'd distract Bok Choy and get him out of the room. Then he could weed out the real villain. LarryBoy burst into the room, pretending to be in great distress. Bok Choy, he cried. There's a terrible emergency. Some superhero must act. All the superheroes sprang to their feet, ready for action. Oh no, said LarryBoy. Only Bok Choy can handle this emergency. Why is that? Asked Bok Choy. There are plenty of capable superheroes here. Well, this emergency is taking place in the teacher's lounge. Only teachers are allowed in there. And they're out of coffee. Jumpin' Java, shouted Bok Choy. This is a caffeine catastrophe. You superheroes stay here. I'll take care of this. Bok Choy leaped onto his desk, struck a heroic pose, and uttered his personal heroic cry. Bok Choy away. He then rushed from the room. As soon as Bok Choy exited, Larry slid up to the first of the superheroes with an MM on his mask. "Nice mask," LarryBoy said. "I'm LarryBoy, the superhero right here in Bumblyburg. And you are?" "Musky Melon," said the superhero with MM on his mask. "Oh, that explains the smell," Larry said, disappointed that he wasn't the masked messenger. "Sorry, I'm a little ripe," Musky explained. "I didn't have a chance to shower after my Tai Bo class." "Tai Bo class?" Larry inquired. "Yeah, some of us superheroes who wear capes were having trouble keeping them tied when we were chasing after villains," Musky explained. "We learned some new bows that won't come undone as easily. And we also looked at something fascinating." Yeah, said LarryBoy. "Good to meet you. Gotta go." "Well, one down. That means that the other hero must be the real villain." Okay, there she is. Chapter 11. When well-meaning superheroes attack. LarryBoy quickly moved to another desk that was beside the other superhero with MM on her mask. "Nifty mask," LarryBoy said. "Is it new?" "As a matter of fact, it is," she said. "My old one was a poly blend and gave me a horrible rash when I got hot chasing villains. This one is high-tech, cotton-esque, wicks away the perspiration." "I get the message," LarryBoy said with a wink, trying to trick his new prime suspect. "Funny you should mention that," the unknown superhero replied. "I'm not very good with messages." "I bet you are," Larry said, standing slowly. "Well, here's a message from LarryBoy. It's not nice to mess with the ears of Bumblyburg." With that, LarryBoy shot both of his super suction ears at the masked potato. But when the other superheroes heard the commotion, they instinctively activated all their superhero gadgets. In a split second, the room was filled with ropes, grappling hooks, nets, hoses, smoke, bungee cords, squid ink, foam, slingshots, boomerangs, and a saxophone. Just then, Bok Choy re-entered the room. "LarryBoy, there's plenty of coffee in the..." Then he saw the mess. "What is going on here?" LarryBoy spoke up. "I discovered a super villain infiltrating our class. The masked messenger. Her evil plan was to interfere with the ability of our fine citizens to be good listeners, thereby creating chaos and confusion." The potato was struggling to say something, but there was a super suction ear covering her mouth. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Bok Choy said. "We'll listen to what she has to say before you try to whip her into shape. Release the plungers." LarryBoy released her, and the potato readjusted her mask. "I should have stayed in Boise where they understand us, Spuds," she said. "I'm not the masked messenger. I am the mashed marvel." The other superheroes gasped. "When I said I was good with messages," she continued, "I meant that I'm good with mental messages. I could read minds with my superpowers." "Yeah, I just bet you can," LarryBoy thought. "No, I really can," the mashed marvel replied. "If you would have been a good listener, LarryBoy, none of this would have happened." The other superheroes nodded in agreement as they gathered their super gadgets and superhero handbooks. "I think we all learned a valuable lesson tonight," said Bok Choy. "Now let's go out and be good listeners. Class dismissed." Chapter 12. The Stenchman and His Henchman. LarryBoy sat at his desk. He felt horrible. He had caused all kinds of trouble by not being a good listener. Worst of all, he had lost the respect of his fellow superheroes. "Chin up, LarryBoy." It was awful Alvin the Onion. He had been in the class all along, disguised as Marine Boy. Now he and LarryBoy were the only ones left in the classroom. Most of the lights were off, except for a floor lamp sitting off to one side. "So you had a tough night. It happens to all of us," said the disguised Onion. "I'm sure the other superheroes will forget all about this in 10 or 20 years. "I feel so foolish," LarryBoy said. "I wish I was a better listener." Awful Alvin had to suppress a giggle. LarryBoy was walking right into his trap. "I have just the thing for that," awful Alvin said, feeling especially awful. I made these devices specifically to help people listen. Being careful to stand behind LarryBoy, he reached into a large box on the floor and carefully lifted 2 glowing orbs, the extreme earwax. Just tilt your head back, he said to LarryBoy. You'll be a better listener in no time. Awful Alvin needed a little more light to make sure the extreme earwax were placed securely. He reached over and pulled Lampy from his strategic position near the wall. LarryBoy glanced up as the lamp came into view. Oh, hi, Lampy, he said. LarryBoy's eyes went wide. Lampy? But before he could react, Awful Alvin had attached the extreme earwax to Larry's super suction ears. Larry heard the squeal of high-pitched tones like a radio dial being tuned to a distant station. Now LarryBoy saw the villain remove the stolen mask and costume he had been wearing. It was Awful Alvin. So we meet again, said Awful Alvin. You ever hear of breath mints? Larry asked the onion-scented villain. But he couldn't even hear his own words. Then, when the static and squealing stopped, he could only hear the sound of Awful Alvin's voice. Now, LarryBoy, you will hear only what I want you to hear, and you will ignore hearing all that is good, he snickered. I may even have you sing the Awful Alvin theme song that I just finished, and it's not as awful as you might suspect. I thought you might be onto my plan, Awful Alvin explained, so I put the letters MM on the box to throw you off the trail. LarryBoy tried hard not to listen to Awful Alvin's words, even getting so far as to try and figure out the words to the Awful Alvin theme song. More than just an onion, he's a super onion sneak. He's a really rotten stinker, so you don't dance cheek to cheek. It was no use. The villain's words took over, and they were the only thing LarryBoy could hear. He had to fight it. He had to think of a way to contact Archie and stop this heartless onion. But how? How? How indeed? Oh, there's Archie. Chapter 13. Oh, where is my LarryBoy? The next morning, Archie was beside himself with worry. Larry's jammies were neatly folded, his bunny slipper was next to his bed, and his hairbrush was right there in plain sight. It was clear that Larry had not come home after superhero class last night. Archie got no answer on any of LarryBoy's communication devices, not his mop video phone, not his belt buckle radio, not his transistor toaster pastry, and not even on his digital toothpick. Archie feared that LarryBoy was in the clutches of the masked messenger. He called Bok Choy at the Bumblyburg Community College and listened as the professor told him all about the unfortunate incident that happened during the superhero class. So it is possible LarryBoy could just be too embarrassed to come home, Archie asked. That could be, said Bok Choy. But at least he had someone to talk to. When I left, he was with the superhero from Bumbly Bay, Marine Boy. Archie thanked Bok Choy and turned his attention to the police scanner for possible news of LarryBoy's whereabouts. Bumbly Station, this is Car 54. Car 54, where are you? We're on the outskirts of Bumblyburg in the Villain's Lair district. We just picked up this avocado we found wandering around here. You're not going to believe this, but Guacamole here claims to be kidnapped superhero from Bumbly Bay. He won't reveal his superhero identity, but he says his costume was stolen by Awful Alvin the Onion. At that point, Archie put it all together. LarryBoy was seen last with Marine Boy, who was from Bumbly Bay. Then a superhero from Bumbly Bay claimed Awful Alvin had stolen his costume. Awful Alvin must have been posing as Marine Boy when Bok Choy last saw LarryBoy. Great galloping galoshes, said Archie. LarryBoy must have fallen into the awful clutches of Awful Alvin the Onion and Lampy. Meanwhile, in the skies above Bumblyburg, an onion-shaped blimp positioned itself over the Veggie Valley Elementary School. In the blimp's gondola were Awful Alvin, Lampy, LarryBoy, and hundreds of small velvet boxes rigged with tiny, tear-shaped parachutes. Normally, LarryBoy would have been uncomfortable at this height, and by uncomfortable, I mean downright loopy with fear. Normally, he would have been curled up on the floor calling out for his rubber ducky. But this was not a normal time for LarryBoy. He was not acting like himself. He was acting less like a superhero and more like an un-superhero. His eyes were half closed, and his mind could only register the constant villainous cackling of awful Alvin. Prepare to watch the beginning of the end of the beginning that ends the begin. Well, just watch, said awful Alvin. Each of these precious parachutes will carry a pair of earwax to the unsuspecting playground below. When the kids at Veggie Valley place the earwax in their ears, awful Alvin knew they would only be able to hear one thing, his own hideous commands. The kids would become his drones, just like LarryBoy, except without plunger ears. We are over the drop site, awful Alvin announced. Lampy, release the earwax. Lampy stood straight and remained very still. This is no time for second thoughts, Lampy. Earwax away. Lampy's shade moved slightly in the breeze, but the trap door beneath the boxes remained closed. You're right, Lampy, he said. Maybe we should let our special guest have the honor. LarryBoy, pull the lever and drop the earwax down to the school children of Veggie Valley. Under the control of the extreme earwax and awful Alvin's villainous voice, Larry pulled the lever and released the earwax to fall to the children of Veggie Valley Elementary School. What's going to happen? And why is Archie there just looking at us? What's up? Chapter 14. The Earwax Unravels. Back at the Larry cave, Archie paced nervously back and forth. Suddenly, the Larry alarm went off. The Larry radar had detected an unknown object in the skies above Bumblyburg. To the Larry scope, yelled Archie. Archie blushed as he realized there was no one there other than Larry's rubber ducky. He was talking to himself again. And on that, we're going to take a break. I need a drink of water. Water's good for me. Alkaline water. Archie regained his composure and pressed a button, which caused a high-powered telescope to emerge from one of the turrets on the mansion. It was a clear day, and it didn't take long to spot the slow-moving, onion-shaped blimp in the sky over Bumblyburg. Archie zoomed in on the blimp. Oh my, Master Larry, Archie said as he saw LarryBoy standing next to awful Alvin. What has he done to you? Then, Archie noticed LarryBoy's glassy-eyed stare and the glowing orbs in his ears. He zoomed in on the orbs with full magnification. He could make out several small words. If you can read this, you have a really good telescope. Wow. Then he pulled back a little on the zoom function and read the larger letters. Extreme earwax. Earwax? Suddenly Archie realized why LarryBoy hadn't been responding to his communicator. He was under the control of the earwax. This is terrible, said Archie. Those earwax are extremely powerful. If I don't find a way to neutralize them quickly, the damage could become permanent. Archie took the smaller set of earwax that LarryBoy had given him down to the Larry lab. He had to study them to find out a way to disarm the earwax. The future of Bumblyburg was at stake. Meanwhile, back at Veggie Valley Elementary, awful Alvin's plan was working perfectly. Junior Asparagus was running around trying to warn his classmates not to put the earwax in their ears, but none of them were listening. The kids were excited at the prospect of only hearing what they wanted to hear. But instead of hearing only what they wanted to hear, the kids ended up hearing something no one wanted to hear, the awful voice of awful Alvin. They became unwilling servants just like LarryBoy. The kids surrounded Junior, and soon even he had earwax in his ears. Alvin's blimp landed on the playground. Touchdown, he said. 7 points for us, Lampy. Or is it 6? What does it matter? I make the rules now. And I say it's 7. Let's get some cheerleaders. Maybe a mascot, too. An onion ring might be nice. Go Rings. It has a nice ring to it. Don't you think, Lampy? That's a crazy laugh. Normally, LarryBoy would have taken Awful Alvin to jail just for making such a bad pun. But all he could do now was listen through the extreme earwax. Okay, my faithful kitty brigade, Awful Alvin said to the earwaxed children of Veggie Valley Elementary. It's time for you to do my bidding, and I bid that you shall do awful things that will please me and only me. Then Awful Alvin looked at LarryBoy and explained how the children of Bumblyburg were now under his control. I've taken away the authority of anyone they've ever listened to, parents, teachers, police officers, even God. They are all powerless in the ears of the children. Ha ha ha, ha ha, he cackled. He had the kids line up and started giving them awful commands that only Awful Alvin's awful mind control could ever come up with. First, he commanded them to stand on their heads, when he commanded them to hop around like kangaroos. After that, he commanded them to scratch that spot on his back that he could never reach. Then he commanded them to do something so awful that it was almost too awful for even Awful Alvin. He commanded them to country line dance. LarryBoy and the Veggie Valley kids could only helplessly obey each of the commands. Look at them all dancing around. And there's Archie studying those. Chapter 15. Archie makes an eerie, wacky discovery. Meanwhile, back at the Larry Cave, Archie was working feverishly to find a way to disable the earwax, but nothing was working. Picking up a tiny earwax, Archie carried it over to the electron microscope, passing near the communications console. As he did, an ear-piercing screech echoed through the Larry Cave. In the gondola of the blimp, LarryBoy heard the same screech, only louder. Awful Alvin heard it too, even louder, due to the microchips implanted in his inner ears. Ow! Archie shrieked in the Larry Cave. Youch! LarryBoy yelped in the blimp's gondola. Ouchie wah-wah! Awful Alvin screamed. Archie flipped off the microphone switch, and everything went silent. I must have left the microphone on when I last attempted to call Master Larry, he mumbled to himself. That screech was audio feedback from the microphone. Archie had accidentally discovered a way to communicate to the earwax. With some extra fine-tuning, maybe he could reach LarryBoy. But how could he counter the effect of the extreme earwax? That part would have to be up to LarryBoy. Only LarryBoy could listen and learn by stopping to think about what he was hearing and from whom. He would have to discern whom he trusted and who was telling him what was best for him. And that certainly wasn't Awful Alvin. When the ringing in his ears subsided, LarryBoy thought he'd heard Archie's distinctive voice. It sounded like he had said, ow. To Awful Alvin, it had sounded like the ringing of 1,000 bells. 1,000 bells that went, ow. When he could hear again, at last, he said, Lampy, shed some light on this problem. What caused that malfunction? I want some answers now. There's Lampy. Lampy's cool. Chapter 16. The evil has landed. Lampy provided no answers, but he didn't claim there was any further threat either. So long as the Veggie kids continued to follow Alvin's orders, everything seemed to be going according to plans. No one can stop me now, Awful Alvin screeched. Now, LarryBoy will be using his superpowers to help me do any awful thing I choose, like taking cuts in lines at the movies, checking out with more than 10 items in the express lane, driving alone in the carpool lane, swimming without a lifeguard at the community pool, and tearing off those do not remove labels on mattresses. The list is endless. Picking up his earwax transmitter, Awful Alvin announced, "Children of Bumblyburg, it's time for more of your awful assignments. The reign of Awful Alvin the Onion is about to begin. Ha 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 ha." The villain's maniacal laugh was still ringing in LarryBoy's ears when he once again heard high-pitched squeals. Suddenly, Awful Alvin's voice seemed to be mixing with Archie's. If there was ever a time LarryBoy needed guidance, it was now. LarryBoy thought back to the lesson he'd heard in his superhero class. He realized he had been listening in class, but he hadn't really paid attention. He thought hard. Let the wise something and get guidance, or was it guide the wise to avoid something? Maybe get the rice pudding if you're having a yearning. That doesn't seem right either. LarryBoy focused all his concentration on the lesson, and finally, not only the words came to him, but the meaning. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. He just had to listen to the people he trusted, those who loved him and wanted what was best for him. Suddenly, it became perfectly clear, and he could hear only Archie. "Master Larry," Archie said quietly, "if you truly learned your lesson, you should be able to hear me. I have a plan. Now listen carefully." Archie went through the plan with LarryBoy, who carefully listened to the guidance from his trusted butler and mentor. The superhero knew it was his only chance to defeat Awful Alvin and save Bumblyburg. He had to break the spell of the earwax once and for all. Chapter 17. Evil on the inside, chewy on the outside. Grabbing a list of student names he had stolen from Veggie Valley Elementary School, Awful Alvin began giving out awful assignments. "Percy P., you're going to be in charge of putting wet paint signs on all the benches, bushes, doors, sidewalks, trees, and streets. Okay, hop to it." Percy nodded and moved to obey. "Laura Carrot," he called, "you'll be in charge of mixing the recyclables with the regular garbage. Go on now." Awful Alvin continued giving out awful assignments to all of the kids, drinking directly out of milk cartons at the grocery store, replacing the number 2 pencils with number 3s, breaking the bottom tips off pointed ice cream cones, losing the caps to colored markers until only Junior Asparagus remained. Oh, look at all those kids doing all those horrible chores. "Ah, Junior Asparagus, my little green friend, I have an especially awful job for you," cackled Awful Alvin. Junior snapped to action, but instead of listening to Awful Alvin, he concentrated on what he had heard from his mom and dad. They had taught him to listen only to the people who loved him, the people he could trust. This was his chance to help LarryBoy. "I won't listen to you, Mr. Awful. I'm only going to listen to the people who care about me." "You care about me, don't you, LarryBoy?" Junior's words got through to LarryBoy loud and clear. "I sure do, Junior. Bumblyburg is in need of a hero, and I am that hero." Taking aim at Awful Alvin, he fired both super suction ears in rapid succession. Unfortunately, they fell to the ground and bounced out at the villain's feet. "Uh-oh," LarryBoy said. "Did you really think I wouldn't deactivate your firing mechanism?" Awful Alvin asked. "Please, LarryBoy, give me a little more credit than that." "Well, I have plenty other weapons to use against you," LarryBoy said. "Don't I, Archie?" "Oh, I forgot. He can't hear me unless I turn this on." LarryBoy activated his belt buckle radio, and a tremendous screech of feedback filled the air. Luckily for LarryBoy, the extreme earwax no longer had any effect. Unluckily for Awful Alvin, his inner ear implants were still cranked to the max. He clutched his ears in pain, but he managed to get out one command. "Children, seize him! Switch off his belt buckle radio," he cried. The kids dutifully surrounded LarryBoy. "Uh-oh, he's going to be in trouble now." "No, wait," the superhero protested. "Kids, it's me, LarryBoy. Listen to me. Don't you trust me? You know I want what's best for all of you. You have to choose very carefully when you decide who you will listen to. I'm the good guy, He's the bad guy, and he doesn't want to do what's right. As Junior switched off LarryBoy's belt buckle radio, he looked up at his hero and realized that he trusted LarryBoy. LarryBoy loved him and wanted what was best for him. Awful Alvin did not. As Junior understood the value of listening to the right people, he was able to shake his head hard enough to cause the earwax to fall out. He smiled at LarryBoy and looked around at the other kids. Percy P. grinned as he too listened to LarryBoy. Then Laura Carrot smiled as the superhero's words came through loud and clear. 2 by 2, the earwax were shaken out of the kids' ears, and everyone realized just how awful Alvin was. As the villain slowly recovered from his latest bout with the screeching feedback, LarryBoy quickly hatched a plan. "Does everyone have chewing gum?" he whispered to the kids. The kids took an assortment of gum from their pockets: Squiggly Spearmint, Palooka Pop, Molar Madness, Chewy Kablooey, Gooey-licious, Jaw Mashers, Tooth Tinglers, every kind of gum imaginable. "Get chewing," LarryBoy said quietly, as Awful Alvin struggled back to a standing position. "When you get a good sticky wad, take out your earwax, stick 'em in the gum, and stick the gum to Awful Alvin." Everyone started chewing frantically, including LarryBoy, who gobbled a whole pack of his favorite grape gum, Bumblyburg. Awful Alvin's head was still throbbing as he turned to the kids. "Listen up, children," he commanded. "Okay, I tricked you into wearing the earwax, but that doesn't mean you still can't listen to me. In fact, if you listen to me now, you will get to help me mess up the entire school. Doesn't that sound like fun? No more school?" That's not fun. The kids paused. Messing up the school did sound like fun. But before the kids could do anything, Junior said, "LarryBoy's right. Awful Alvin is a bad guy. If we listen to him, we'll end up doing bad stuff too. We need to listen to those who care about us, those who care about doing what's right, like LarryBoy." Junior Asparagus smiled at LarryBoy, and LarryBoy smiled right back. Awful Alvin, however, did not smile, especially when a glistening hunk of pink Palooka Pop hit him squarely on the forehead and stuck tight. "Who threw that?" Awful Alvin demanded, as a bluish wad of Molar Madness hit his cheek and 3 other soggy pieces of assorted chewing gum landed on his head. "Lampy, help me!" the villain cried, but even his faithful friend seemed not to hear. The kids were determined to bring this villain down by attacking him with colored wads of gum, each with tiny blinking earwax inside. Stop it right now," Alvin said, slowly realizing deep down in his stinky layers that the earwax weren't working anymore. He backed away slowly, grabbing Lampy and looking for an escape route. As Awful Alvin tried to run to his blimp to get away, LarryBoy stuck 2 extremely large wads of purple gum on either side of the villain's head. 2 orb-shaped wads of gum glowed and caused a slight tremoring in the air. The extreme earwax were no longer in Larry's super suction ears. They were embedded in the grape gum stuck to Awful Alvin's head, along with hundreds of smaller earwax stuck all over him. "I have a little feedback for you, Awful Alvin," LarryBoy said. "First of all, don't mess with Bumblyburg. Second of all, this." LarryBoy reached down and switched on his belt buckle radio. In that very instant, an onion-splitting pitch of feedback emitted from hundreds of earwax, plus the extreme earwax from LarryBoy, launching Awful Alvin and Lampy high into the air over Bumblyburg. A billowing trail of steam followed Alvin and Lampy as they landed with a splash in the community swimming pool. "Anyone for onion dip?" LarryBoy quipped as the citizens of Bumblyburg cheered. Now he's back home. Chapter 18. There's no taste like liver and no place like home. "It's good to be home," Archie said. "It's good to be home, Archie," Larry said as he relaxed in his favorite easy chair. "And it's good to have Bumblyburg back to normal." "Indeed it is," said Archie. "I sure did learn a valuable lesson about listening," Larry said. "That's good news," said Archie, "because I was just going to tell you that it is time for you to get back to your janitor job." Suddenly, a glassy look came over Larry's eyes. What was that, Archie? I can't hear you. Those earwax must be affecting me again. Archie put a big piece of chewing gum into his mouth and began to chew. Master Larry, he said, I have a big wad of Bumblyburgs, and I'm not afraid to use it. Larry hopped up out of his chair. I was just kidding, he said as he grabbed his mop and rushed off to work. Look, he's blowing a bubble with his gum. Okay. Oh, I guess that's it. That was the last of that story. That looks like a teaser for another story, so that's something we'll look at a different time. LarryBoy and the Emperor of Envy. Anyway, that was LarryBoy and the Awful Earwax Attacks. What do y'all think of that? That was a long story. I didn't think I was going to make it through that one. Hopefully, y'all enjoyed it, and we'll see what kind of other books I've got to read. But this was a good book, even though it was a little bit long. So until next time, kids, be excellent.